All right. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is where you're calling in from. Thanks so much for being here with us today for this month's CMWS webinar, which is also part 3 of our LGBTQ plus series, Mentoring LGBTQ plus Youth Policies and Practices for Inclusion. My name is Jake Sullivan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the training delivery manager with Mentor National. Very grateful that you're all here with us today, especially in these times. So I'm hoping that we can have a really great conversation, find some community, find some connection today as well. As you're dropping in, we're going to give folks maybe another minute or so to get settled, but drop your name, where you're calling in from in the chat, as well as what is your favorite comfort food? What is your favorite comfort food is the question we're asking today. Hopefully we can get some good recommendations and share some of our favorite comfort foods. So again, drop your name, where you're calling in from, and then what is your favorite comfort food in the chat as we're giving folks another minute or two to settle in. And remember to click the 3 dots so that your message is seen by everybody versus just host and panelists. All right, here we go. Oh, I'm already seeing Canada representation. Love that, Candace. What was it? Lasagna soup. I've never heard of. Okay, now see, I'm gonna need some recipes after this. So if you haven't added me on LinkedIn or email me these recipes because I'm already curious. Madison from Buffalo, burrito from Chipotle, same. Love it. Awesome. So many good mac and cheese, a classic. I know mac and cheese can be controversial in the way that you make it, and everybody has their own preferences. All right. Again, for folks who are just joining in, welcome to today's webinar, Mentoring LGBTQ plus Youth Policies and Practices for Inclusion. I'm just giving folks a second to settle in and also getting to know you all a little bit more. I don't even know what my answer for favorite comfort food is. I think just chocolate chip cookies. I think maybe any type of cookie, really. Ange from New Jersey, a bucket of fried chicken. Love that answer. Tacos. Seen a couple tacos. Pasta. Seen a lot of pasta. Ice cream. Trish from Baltimore. Love the Baltimore representation. I'm in DC right now, but I live in Baltimore. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. More mac and cheese. Awesome. So again, keep continuing to drop in your name, where you're calling in from, and your comfort food, your favorite comfort food in the chat. We'll get started with some tips for engagement. So we'll get started with, again, reminders around the chat box and the Q&A. Chat box is used to introduce yourself, talk with one another, react to our presenters, share resources. And then the Q&A box, please put any questions that you have for presenters throughout the webinar in that box, so that we have them all in one place once time for the Q&A starts. As a reminder, this webinar is recorded and will be sent out in about a week with the slides and, again, any other resources that we talk about today. As always, by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen in that toolbar, you'll be able to enable live captions if you haven't already enabled them. And we'll also have a transcription of this webinar that we'll send out as well. So again, thanks everybody for being here. And I believe at this point, I'm passing it over to our truly amazing facilitators. I've really loved working on this whole series with them. They're absolutely incredible leaders in this field, and I'm really excited for what they have planned for everybody today. So passing it over to Dr. Christian Rummel and Nia Clark.
Hello, my people. Welcome. Oh my gosh, there's 168 of us. What a gathering. I'm also seeing like all of the comfort foods that people have. I saw everything from tea and cakes to shish kebabs from David. Okay, I like the shish kebabs. I like the cookies. For me, I'm also a stickler around my mac and cheese. I prefer the baked casserole style, especially an edge, as opposed to the creamier side. So that's just me. I am a mac and cheese girl. Yes, it's wonderful to see a lot of pasta folks. I love the cereal someone mentioned. I like a good, like, crunchy cereal every now and then. Welcome to our third and final installment of the CWMS series. Today, our conversation is centered around policies and practices for working with or on behalf of LGBTQ plus youth. And I want to make sure that people continue to be active in the chat. Today, we're going to be having some conversations, some very real conversations with you today. We are fully aware of what has taken place over the last couple of weeks, given the election, given some, news around the world. And so we want to have a conversation with you all today. Oh, someone said we worked. Oh, Evan. Hi, Evan. Yes, Evan McCracken. Love to see you. So, yes, I worked in the research world with Evan as his supervisor. And so we're going to have some real conversations today. I encourage you to do the same. This is not a time to mince words. This is not a time to ball up in a corner. While I want to appreciate and hold space for grief, today is a conversation to be your full, real, and authentic self. So whatever you're feeling as it comes up, but feel free to type it in the chat. I know we cannot engage with you, unmute you and such, but it helps us as the presenters to know what your frame of mind is as we're going through these conversations, because you are the practitioners and many of you are going to be doing this work, whether it's the development team writing grants, whether it's the, match support specialists, the parents, the social workers. So write and type how you feel. Okay? All right. With that being said, let's take a look at the agenda. So we're going to do some welcome and introductions. We're going to actually have some reflections as we face our future and what it means for LGBTQ plus youth in the next 4 years. We're going to review the LGBTQ plus mentoring supplement and what we originally in session two, we had a very different perspective on how we were going to deliver this content because it was of the perspective that we were going to be able to implement many of these changes. And the conversation we're having with you today is all highly probable. Uh, we want to make suggestions to you because it's highly probable that given the current landscape, some of these things that were policy recommendations are no longer going to be allowed. Depending on what state you're in. I saw folks ranging from Massachusetts to Oregon to New Mexico, so all depending on your local political climate. Some of these things can be implemented, and many of these things we're just going to recommend given how the election turned out. Okay? And then we're going to share some additional resources and then go over some Q&A. So our goals today is to become aware of the existing best practices for creating inclusive and affirming mentoring relationships for LGBTQ plus youth. We're going to do some community sharing of insights that you all have, resources, potential strategies to support LGBTQ plus young people if and when those restrictions on care happen, and also learn tips to create change through your organization, or at least recommendations on doing so. Okay? So just to give you another reminder for those who have not attended these sessions before, my name is Nia Desiree Clark. I use the She Series. I am a child welfare consultant and professional of almost 20 years. I've worked in everywhere from residential counseling to most recently, I have become the Senior Specialist of Training and Mentorship at Human Rights Campaign Foundation. And a lot of my background is in mentoring. I actually ran my own mentoring program at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, where I matched over 200 youth with LGBTQ plus mentors in my time, and have since done a great deal of consulting for Mentor and for Big Brothers Big Sisters of America on creating more inclusive mentoring practices and policies for queer youth. I'll pass it on to Christian.
Wow, I want to thank all of you for being here. I see more than 200 folks are part of this community. And for those of you that were part of our last session, we talked a lot about the ripple effect and the way that each of us can help to foster change in the world around us. As you know, it's going to be a rough stretch. So I want to kick this off really by thanking you for showing up, because the world is going to depend on people like you who are here, who care, who are going to be advocates. And so all of what we're going to talk about today is what's aspirational It's about the hopes that we have for young people. I really can't stress enough how much I'm grieving right now. I assume a lot of you are as well. And so as we come together in this space, I really do want to create an opportunity for us to think about how we can channel this energy, how we can use our time together to really respond. And as you'll hear in a couple minutes, to create spaces of refuge, to create opportunities for resilience, because those are the things that are going to get us through. So I want to say just a little about me. Is I've been a researcher. I've been part of this movement for quite some time. Nia and I are dear friends and colleagues, and I really am just thankful to be part of an experience where it's drawn from the hope that we have, that we can all create a better world together. So I want to talk in a quick moment to share one of the things that's been giving me inspiration, which is a quote that I think is really important. And Nia, you can skip through the mentorist slide. I can talk about that at the end, but I really want to. Oh, sorry. There's all the
We
resources.
can go back. We'll go back. Go ahead, share your quote.
So I really have been drawn to this quote right now, especially because of the moment we're in. And it's this idea that we're powerful because we have survived. I want you to take a moment to think about that. Think about those words. Think about what it means to get through your day, what it means to survive, what it means to be part of this group of folks that over years have been defined by rejection, have been defined by shame, have been othered, have been silenced. These are the experiences that make up what being LGBTQ plus is. And yet we survive. Over and over and over again, generations of us grow into who we're meant to be. And it's such a powerful thing to see, because we all draw from some sort of strength within us, from some sort of place of community that makes all the difference. And so each of us are powerful because we have survived. And I want to talk about a couple themes that have really resonated about what survival looks like and what the spaces that we create in the future may depend upon for young people that are growing up. And there are two areas and themes that I just keep coming back to. And the first is resilience. And so the idea of resilience is the ability to bounce back from hardship whenever we face adversity. So you could pull that next slide up, Nia. It's the idea that when we are in spaces where we're othered, where we're dealing with the stress from every part of our lives, in school where kids are picking on us, at home where we're rejected, from legislative bodies that say such hateful things about us, we pull from resilience each and every time we encounter that. And that is something mentoring relationships can foster. That's something that spaces in schools and spaces in our programs can foster. It's something we all possess. It's an ability to heal. It's an ability to grow in the tension. It's our ability to channel from our pain to keep going. And so my hope around resilience is that as you all 200 plus of you, will start thinking about ways to equip young people with those supports, to help make sure that as they're growing up in a climate that is going to be hate-filled, I am not going to sugarcoat that at all, that we give them the opportunities to breathe. We give them the opportunities to heal through our support. And that's the other part of this. One of the real areas that I keep coming back to is the idea of refuge. And that is so important for the work we do in mentoring, but and all of what we're talking about today is really about places where you can find protection, places where you can find shelter. And so the work we did on the supplement, the LGBTQ plus supplement, was really all driven by this idea of how do you invite folks in to give them protection, to help them find shelter. And that refuge is going to be even more important as we look at a climate that's going to have more bans on the way that we provide support, or more silence, or more invisibility, or codified shame. It's going to depend on each and every one of us to provide refuge for the young people that are in our care. Don't doubt the power of either of these things. Don't doubt the power of being able to give safe spaces for young people to breathe and heal, or the skills to bounce back from all of the day-to-day struggles that all of us are about to face. So I want to start off by saying that those are actually hopeful things. They are ways forward. They are ways to channel some of what we're going to talk about today and leverage as we look at a roadmap for what we can do as we move forward.
Thank you, Christian. And I hope that you're looking in the chat. There are so many folks that are with you and are feeling similarly. And I am so grateful that you are all here so we can have what I hope to be this very important conversation where we can learn, we can commit to shared learning and mutual learning. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate you for your vulnerability. And it's very clear that folks are able to empathize with what you're experiencing. Okay. I am going to go back a couple of slides because I wanted to make sure to share some resources. So I got these resources from my work in the research world and also as an employee at Human Rights Campaign Foundation. So you can screenshot these. Jake has indicated that he's going to make these slides and the recording of this available after this training as well. But these are some resources that are available for LGBTQ plus youth and adults. So one thing I will add is that since the election, many of the LGBTQ crisis lines, particularly for youth, have seen a 700% increase in activity and calls and requests. So those organizations, including Trevor Project and Trans Lifeline, they have asked that when and if you give out the resources to these crisis lines, that you also include 988 for some of the overflow. But as you can see, with that 700% increase, we're already seeing, is it possible to make this larger? I think so. Oh, sorry. How about that? Is that bigger? Oops, sorry. Okay. Hopefully that's a little bit bigger. I tried. But we will make sure that this is available to you. But you can screenshot it for now. And just remember that when you offer these lines to include 988, as they've seen a very high uptick in calls, especially from LGBTQ plus youth. Okay. And then today, you can find this. HRC just published this week. And this is a new resource guide because there are some of you who are practitioners or engaging in direct service, and you're wondering how to broach these topics or how to hold space for especially young people when you don't have answers. I am always a proponent of being the adult that doesn't always know everything, because that actually is what creates more empathy. And so it's not so much about having all the answers, but it's your determination to find the answers that you can. And I believe that being a conduit of information is the best way to do that. So the new publication is called Facing the Future Together. It was just published either today or yesterday. And it has ways to support mental health, protecting online privacy for young people and adults, how to talk to kids about election results, what legal protections are in place right now, and then marriage equality, because that is, one of the things that might be on the chopping block with a majority conservative Supreme Court. Gender affirming care, again, the president-elect has stated that he plans to rescind all protections regarding gender affirming care, and then how to actually get involved. So there's some of us who are like me, and I am very much still in my grief, and I believe that it's okay to be stuck in your grief. And I may be grieving for a while. And I also want to make space for folks who have to activate change and have to be embedded in it. And so I want to offer that this is the space for both of those things. Okay? All right. So now we're going to do a Mentimeter. We want to actually take a temperature check and ask you some questions. So you can scan the QR code that you see here, or you can go to menti.com and it's going to ask you 4 questions, and then we'll actually review your answers to the questions together. So spend about maybe 5 minutes working on the Menti, and then we will take a look at your results. I'm going to copy the link as well, just in case folks are having difficulties. Let's see. This the participation link. Just in case you're having difficulties with the codes or on your phone. Okay, so just spend a few minutes and answer whatever comes to mind. And again, I'm just going to say I appreciate you all for being here and spending the time today to have this critical conversation. Oh, I'm sorry, Farhia. So maybe what we can do, Farhia, is as we're going over, you can type in some of your responses if you'd like into the chat. I apologize. I saw your message, Riley, about what you're doing to create a sense of refuge for folks. I appreciate you. Steve, I see your message as well. Okay, so there are 4 slides for you to survey and answer. Feel free to put a thumbs up in the chat when you're done with all 4. And I see those words. They're coming up for you. Thank you. Thank you, Alicia, Evan, and Landon. Okay. Let's take a look at what you all came up with. I will say that this is the largest word cloud that I have ever seen. And it's clear that there are a maelstrom and a plethora of emotions and words that you all are expressing yourselves with. So let me take a look. Okay, so the question, see if I can enlarge this at all. Here we go. The question is, what words come to mind when you think about LGBTQ plus youth post-election? And this word cloud works in majorities as well. So the words that are used most prominently are the words in the center. And so this means that many of you are scared. Many of you are worried. Many of you are feeling love. You're remembering resilient. There is anger and justifiable anger. There is hopelessness. You're unsure. You're disappointed. You're wanting to provide protection. There's empathy. There's a backpedaling, right? I saw that one of the most Googled searches in some of the swing states was, how do I change my vote? Yes, so some of the backpedaling, underrepresented. Someone actually wrote Trump supports LGBTQ. That is, I'm going to allow the community to learn from each other today that Donald Trump, as a transgender person, I would say, I disagree with that statement. Disenfranchised, persecuted, what can I do? Afraid, protection, disappointed, less resources, resilient, persisting. I hope that you all are seeing what the general feeling is. And I want to be mindful of the other LGBTQ plus folks that are in this space today, to allow this to be informative of how others feel in the mentoring world, how others feel about child welfare right now, how others feel about young people. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at the next slide. So I asked all of you, hold on one second. What are your hopes for LGBTQ plus youth over the next year? And I can see support. I see safety. I see hope, protection, understanding, calm, teamwork, overcome the negativity, reassurance. They will be fine. I think that's we finished that sentence, right? They will be fine as long as, right? They will be fine. Empowerment, survival, pride, providing safe spaces, find a voice, to not feel alone, seek strength in each other. Use this to work together. Young people being able to be themselves, resilient, to feel heard, a sense of belonging. Building safe spaces, and look at this, continuing to expand. People are still in there typing out and writing out their feelings and what their hopes are for these young people. And let this be the charge that we lead today. Let this be the message that you take with you today as we continue this conversation. While there are a myriad of fears, there is a lot of hope, and there is a lot of commitment I see from all of you with writing out these hopes for the future for these young people. Yes, and I see from Riley, yes, there are close to 700 legislative bills that are specifically transgender focused. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so next we wanted to ask you about climate and you know the work that is being done at your individual agencies. And so I asked the question, how prepared is your program to continue creating inclusive and affirming services to LGBTQ plus youth as more laws and bans are passed in the coming years? And so a significant number of you said that there is either no action, you have no worries, or there hasn't been any discussion about inclusive or affirming services. It looks like the majority are anxious and worried and waiting to see and taking a more reactive approach. And so kind of hoping to see maybe what laws get passed and seeing how you can protect young people. They introduced legislation in Missouri. I mentioned this in our very first session, that they have introduced legislation in Missouri that if you even support a child in using the name and pronouns that they have chosen for themselves, that you can be charged with sexual indecency felony. And in addition to that, and in addition to paying a fine, you would have to register as a sex offender. So that wait and see approach is very realistic for folks who are kind of afraid. Can I even mentor a young person who transitions, or do I face criminal liability for using a name and pronoun? Actively engaging in conversations with internal allies to explore changes. Looks like a lot of you are there, so that's a very promising. And then many of you are also actively reviewing services and connecting with internal or external allies and developing new policies. It's wonderful to see. And then lastly, Christian actually has put this together. We want to just get a sense of what your program climate is. So on a scale of 1 to 5, it looks like many folks have not prioritized working with LGBTQ plus youth. But it looks like many of your programs are actually doing some of this work. What I hope is that we have a conversation with you today that not necessarily compels you, but helps you to understand exactly what's at stake if we continue to do business as usual. The losses that many young people will experience in their housing, in their education, etc. Okay. I want to just thank you, everyone, for participating in that Mentimeter. I told Christian before we started, it's going to be really helpful for us to temperature check and see where folks are at in their journey to inclusion, and also where they're at emotionally, because that helps us with presenting and doing this work. Okay, so thank you for doing that with us. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on to Christian to talk about the LGBTQ supplement.
Thank you. I actually would love to get a copy of those word clouds to post as well, because I think they're going to offer me hope as we go into the next moment. And I wanted to kind of get us into the nuts and bolts. This was the original plan. And so the goal that we have is to really walk you through the LGBTQ plus supplement to the elements of effective practice, so that you are able to see what I would say is kind of the North Star, what is aspirational in how we provide refuge, protection, and inclusive spaces for young people. And so the supplement came out in 2019, so I co-authored it with Mike Geringer at Mentor. Nia Clark was on our advisory group, and we had folks from HRC, True Colors, LifeWorks. We had Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. We had GSA Network. We had all of these folks come together to talk about what would be important practices every mentoring program should have in place to make sure that LGBTQ plus youth are included and able to access the same benefits of mentoring that we know work. And so we recognize that there really is not a business as usual approach that is the way to do this, that there is intention that is required. And so what we're going to walk you through is all of the intentions that are part of your outreach and recruitment, your intentions that are part of screening, training, matching, all of those core bucket areas, so that you can at least see what would be, again, an aspirational goal. And we'll talk through some of the justifications for what each might mean. And also, I'd love to leverage our community to talk about what some plan Bs might be if, in fact, we cannot do some of the things that have been recommended. I do want to say it came out in 2019. Since then, we've had the 1,500 anti-LGBT bills that have been proposed across the country, all in the context of having guardrails federally here in the US. And so our Canadian friends again, thank you for being here with us. I hope you'll be able to share a bit more from your perspectives about what we can do, because a lot of this is really going to be a lot more complicated, because we will not have the guardrails and the protection from our federal government for a lot of these state and local laws that are happening. So with that said, let's move into our first kind of bucket area. And I want to start with program design, because that is always the starting point for thinking about inclusion. And within that, each of us have a mission statement that describes what it is we're planning to provide support around in our communities and who we're serving. And I'd love if you could just type in to the chat box what your mission statements are. What are the kind of, again, aspirations that you hold as an organization in your communities? So Leah, we have CASA provides best interest advocacy for children in the courts. We strive to make sure that every child experiencing possible abuse and or neglect is safe, has a permanent home, and has the opportunity to thrive. Some other folks, please type in your mission statements. I'd love to see just the scope of ways we're making a difference in the world around us. So Nicole, to provide safe, supportive spaces where children and youth can experience new opportunities, overcome barriers. Wow, we're moving through quickly. We've got, our mission is to create and support one-to-one mentoring relationships to ignite the power and promise. Nicole, to provide safe, supportive places. Bryson, to create space for LGBTQ youth to feel safe and empowered. Alicia, create and support one-to-one mentoring relationships that ignite the power and promise. So all of these are really a really powerful entry point into, again, what it is we're here to do. And I don't see any one of these saying that we're only here to serve white, cisgender, straight Christian kids. What I see is our programming and our services reflecting this broad spectrum of diversity that's within our communities. And so that, again, is one of the most important places for each of us to begin, is this idea that we are here to intentionally support and provide our services to all young people who are in need. That includes LGBTQ plus young people. That will include LGBTQ plus young people. So as we move forward in our next years, our next moments, remember your mission statements. Remember the North Star that they're actually helping to guide you towards, which is inclusion. So I want to talk about what we explored in the supplement. And these are just a few of the benchmarks. These were the things that we recommended folks had in place, and then also wanted to share a few of the justifications for it. And the first part is intentionality. Being committed to inclusion as a core value for the work that you are building for young people. Again, every one of those mission statements did not single out or exclude LGBTQ plus young people. They included them. The other parts that we had, and again, these may be coming under fire with some headwinds, but anti-bullying. How does your program make sure that LGBT kids are not harassed and picked on and bullied in your services? And spelling that out. We know from research with schools, having enumerated policies and giving consequences actually does make a difference. The other part is, how do you support kids who come out? We know young people are going through so many phases of their identity. They're learning new language to describe themselves. They're having these experiences often after they've enrolled in your services. So what are the protections and safeguards you have for those young people that transition, that come out? When they're matched with volunteers, how do you make sure that they are with the right volunteer? Confidentiality has been a huge one. And we're seeing a lot of mandatory outing laws that have been happening across the country, that you have to report to a parent, that a child has transitioned or is using a pronoun or has come out. And so your program may be in direct violation of some of those laws by creating spaces that do not place those young people in harm's way by sharing that information. We know how important it is to keep that information secure because you expose young people to more bullying, to rejection, to other harms that could happen in ways that your record keeping or your questions could really again expose them to a little bit more challenge and risk. And so having policies that discuss that can be mission critical in keeping them safe. The other parts that we'll talk about today are having some sort of training for your staff and your board, exploring partnerships with some LGBTQ plus organizations, really including the voices of folks from your program to share what their experiences are, how they either feel safe, whether that's even a word we can possibly use much, but how they feel included and affirmed. What was it that you did? I think the one piece I want to highlight is around signals of inclusivity. We often, unfortunately, start with the rainbow flags. We start with the signs that say you're welcome, but a lot of programs actually haven't done the work around that. They haven't developed policies to keep kids safe. They haven't created spaces that are affirming for the volunteers in their services. And so to actually do that towards the end, don't set up all of us from the community to fail by coming into a place that we're actually not welcome because you think the only thing you have to do is place a poster up and that makes all the difference. So those are the things I wanted to highlight here with program design. Business as usual doesn't work, and it clearly will not work in the future. You will have to have conversations. There will be situations where there will be a law or a practice that you will have to decide how to respond to. What can you do in light of restrictions that are being placed on you? The other part, and you saw this in your mission statement, every one of you has an ethical responsibility to keep young people in your care protected, to provide refuge. That is something you create. And if you create systems that harm them, you are actively causing more damage in this world than not doing anything at all. And so recognizing the power you have, the ethical responsibility you hold in especially protecting LGBTQ young people in the coming years. And so those are a few of the starting points. And what we're going to do now, Nia and I are going to break back and forth, and we're going to show you some examples of things. We're going to highlight some questions. We're also going to give you opportunities. And I would love to hear as we go along, what would you recommend doing if, in fact, there are those restrictions that forbid you from enacting a lot of these practices that we know work?
Thank you, Christian. And I'm just seeing in the chat, there's a question from Emily. I'm going to defer to Jake, as I believe Mentor has a lot of resources around training for this. And also the supplement itself has very clear recommendations on things that should be included in the training. Jake has put the link together for the supplement, and Christian already puts Christian put his ally verb series together this year, and so those are some resources just to get you started. Regarding recruitment, so this is the difficult part, because when Christian first found me about 8 years ago, I was one of maybe 5, 6 mentoring programs that intentionally worked with LGBTQ plus youth. And we had a very clear focus and had, living in Los Angeles, it was easier for recruitment. This is going to be difficult because based on your individual state legislature, based on your local legislature, based on your board, and what your board is feeling about recruitment, this may be a little more difficult as we face the next administration. because me as a queer person, if I'm looking to either be a mentor in a program, I'm looking for what is called a welcome mat. I'm looking for indicators that I am welcome in a space and that I belong. And so that's going to be difficult when you have legislation or policies that don't support that. My question is, do I belong here? And the same thing when it comes to young people. So I wanted to show you all, I actually got a question about this. So I run mentoring programs specifically for trans youth in my research as an external investigator at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And some of the mentors were asking me, now that we're done with our mentoring program here, where can we go next? How would I actually become a mentor? And I talked about the work that Christian and I have done over the last several years to roll out that welcome mat. What are the things that LGBTQ plus people look for? And we look for their intentionality. We look for boldness, because if we don't see it, we assume that we are not welcome. And so we just wanted to show you a couple of examples of websites. Oh, let's see, excuse me. Can it open? Yes, it does. Okay. Of some websites that actually show you what recruitment can look like. Hold on one second. Here we go. So this is an example from iMentor. So you can see that they work with on behalf of Black and Brown youth. But Christian, where is sorry. Is there an intentional section of this? And so
No.
the answer is no. So you're looking here, is there any indication that LGBTQ youth are welcome here? Is there any indication that if I apply to this program, I belong? Now, the Blackness in me, the Black woman in me says, probably I can find a potential, connection, but is this affirming? Does this say that LGBTQ plus folks are welcome? And you just based on what you're looking at, type into the chat. Do you see something that says that if I were an LGBTQ adult or young person, that I could find a mentor here? Type into the chat. Evan says no, not necessarily, probably not. A lot of no's. Okay. Not explicitly. Okay. Jonna, sharing is caring. So definitely show people what the example could look like. Rebecca says yes, that if you're LGBTQ, that there is clear indication that you could be a mentor in this program. That there's clear indication that you will be protected, that your mentor will not out you, that you will not be outed to your parents. There's a clear indication of that. Okay, not unless I was able to dig into the website. So you really have to look for it, right? Okay. So that's the juxtaposition. So now let's take a look at Big Brothers. So this is the organization that we have worked with. And now I'm here. This is one of the sites we worked with, Orange County and Inland Empire. We actually trained them a couple of times. And what do you see here? An intentional commentary about how it supports the LGBTQ community. You see that they're working with an LGBTQ center, right? They have an executive director that is steeped in the work. You see this difference here. You don't have to say things explicitly. You just see from the visuals that there is space for this. We're trying to show that there are caring adults who can show up for these young people. It looks like they're at some sort of pride event. I can see a pan flag and a bisexual flag in the distance. And so, yes. So what do your websites look like right now? Do you think that your websites, if I were to go there, that I, as an adult transgender woman and child welfare expert and social worker, could be matched with a young person? If I went to your website and I looked at it right now, would it indicate to me that that space is welcoming? That's the question. Okay. So while your policies are one thing, your practice is another. All right, so let's go back to recruitment. So this is another example. Take a look at this description. This is from the wonderful Maryland Mentor. And this is an example of what we could be doing with our recruitment. And so I'm just going to ask you, taking a look at this, are there any things that you might even add to give me an indication that I am welcome here? So this is a job description for mentors, and it shows that I've got to have, I have to have a car, check. I have a human service, I have a master's in social work. I am able to relate to young people, having worked in mentoring and match my own programming. But is there any other language that I might add to this that indicates that as an LGBTQ plus person, even intentionally, that I might be able to do this? So for instance, when I went to volunteermatch.org and I used to put up ads intentionally looking for LGBTQ mentors, what might be something that I would add to this? Let's see, by virtue of the dominant attitude being assumed, recognizing minorities directly is needed. And so how might you do that, Kasha or Kasha? How do we recognize gender and sexual minorities directly? What are some examples? Nicholas says the status quo of LGBTQ is not outright welcome. If the status quo is if LGBTQ plus are not outright welcome, they are not. Historically, that is the case, and many laws, such as the one mentioned earlier, is codifying that we are not welcome in society, let alone a mentoring program. That's a very astute observation, Nicholas. And so what would indicate to you that an organization is actively recruiting in a way that does feel welcoming? I'm going to make some recommendations while you all are continuing to type into the chat. So some of the benchmarks that we saw in programs that were able to do this in a welcoming way. So it's a job description that elevates the skills and values of working with LGBTQ plus youth. Many of those are the skills and values that you need in order to be a mentor. So understanding, for instance, how to cultivate chosen family, dealing with resilience and rejection, right? I see you all are starting to type into the chat, gender inclusive language. They instead of he or she, so removing some of the gendered language, right? Actually including the acronym LGBTQ plus, mentors needed, LGBTQ mentors needed, having a culture section on the description, including inclusive languages and common images, such as the rainbow, minority or LGBTQ plus welcome, adding an icon. Yes, so some sort of visual reminder. Even in this Zoom right now, as I see, the different participants, one of the welcome mats is just pronouns, just an indication of how you want to be honored when I talk about you or when I reference you by name, Madison. What are the indicators? Just that welcome mat lets me know. Okay, outreach to LGBTQ plus adults, inclusive and welcoming language on the website and in the marketing materials. And the justifications for this would be the default of many LGBTQ plus individuals is that we will not be accepted. So, the idea that we already come to these programs with our own histories, having negative experiences as mentees like myself, and having negative experiences of approaching mentoring programs as an LGBTQ plus person. So messaging that specifically affirms participation. So it's not necessarily about just your intention, but it's creating these opportunities where you're explicit and bold in your delivery of recruitment. So when you're trying to recruit, it's not just about what you're doing to recruit, but where are you going? Where are the places that you're actually going? When you do outreach, are you going to any sort of LGBTQ plus events? Are you going to Pride events? Are you involved with PFLAG at all when you're thinking about recruitment? That's another way to think about this as well. Then when it comes to screening, so screening is has been an area, a challenge for so many organizations because they don't always know how to ask and to screen around acceptance, affirmation, and LGBTQ plus uh, individuals. And so I wanted to start out with a question for you, this scenario, and you can type in your answer into the chat. And the question is, one of your longest serving volunteers, so someone who's already been in your program for a while, shared with you that the young person they're matched with came out as gay. So kind of the wait and see approach, right? They tell you they're concerned about advocating for a quote unquote lifestyle they don't believe in and think is wrong. How would you respond to this scenario? I see. I would have asked a question about this before that person has ever matched. So here's the other thing is that many of you have acknowledged that there hasn't been as much inclusion work. So there are mentors, like for instance, the mentoring program I ran, I matched mentors multiple times. They would be matched for a year with a young person and then opt to be matched with someone else. There are mentors that might have been at the program longer than some of you. So that screening process may never have even happened. You may never have known. So what would be a way to address this, not only on the front end, but on the back end? Okay. Reiterate that we support everyone's orientation and suggest we change this match to have them with someone more supportive. I wonder, like the question is, how long have they been matched? Is this a match that's only a month old, or have they been working with this young person since they were 10? And what might happen to this young person if we disrupt that match? Educating the individual about the dangers in supporting them. Okay. I would start by asking questions of the mentor first. I want to know how they learned about the coming out process and how they responded to the youth when the conversation came up. I would talk to them about if they're able to separate their own belief from the work. And if they can't, I would switch them and also talk about if they could continue to support our work. So one of the folks in the chat actually asked like about intentionality with LGBTQ plus persons. And even if you're working with a broad array of diverse communities, how do you do this work intentionally? And so if this is one of the perspectives that a mentor may hold, is it possible that they may have other perspectives that may not be as inclusive when it comes to children with disabilities, when it comes to children who are Jewish, when it comes to children who have undocumented parents, when it comes to children who are Muslim? So this is a part of the screening that we have to do. This intentionality, right, is making sure that we're asking these questions in an intentional way. Okay. So in programs where this work has been done, mentor eligibility, it's screening out homophobic, biphobic, and transphobic volunteers, because we don't allow folks to mentor in our programs who, like I will say, for instance, I was actually screening a mentor who was in our seniors program at the LGBT Center, and he said, I asked him about working with different youth of color, Black and brown youth, and he said, you know what, I will work with anyone but no Blacks. I won't work with the Blacks. When I was, younger and I mentored Two of them, one stole from me and the other one lied to me. So I will work with anyone but no Blacks. So I screened that person out for the same reason that I would screen out anyone for participating in any of those isms, right? So if this person is intolerant, do I really want them to be around a young person or have group mentoring activities? I used to actually have a program called Life Outs where we would actually do group mentoring activities and go to baseball games or go hiking. Do you really want individuals who hold these values to have exposure to young people where this could actually come up and cause harm? Um, and so some of the benchmarks is like scenarios to assess compatibility and actually asking some questions, right? Questioning youth will be, some of the justifications is that we don't know when young people are going to come out. There's a presumption that just because young people have not come out, that they're not LGBTQ. Many young people are questioning and looking to see, is there a welcome mat for me? And if there is a mentor who harbors some of these views, those young people may not come out and they may pursue some of the more negative aspects of identity synthesization. And then there are differences that exist between mentors who actively discriminate and hold values that may be harmful to LGBTQ plus youth, and then those who might actually need support. Okay. So, making sure that you're able to recognize, and if you are in matching or screening, like I have been, you know the difference between I will not work with LGBTQ plus youth. I will not work with a kid who comes out as gay. I won't work with a kid that paints his nails. And, I've never done this before. Is there training that I could possibly get? You can tell how far in a journey someone is in order to be more comfortable working with a youth population or community. Okay. So some examples of things. So folks were asking, well, how do we explicitly ask this? So some of the examples of screening questions. How would you feel about being matched with an LGBTQ plus youth? How would you respond if your mentee came out to you? I love the responses in the chat, and I hope that everyone who has questions about this screening process is reading all of the mutual and shared learning. Okay. What would you say if your mentee used homophobic language during a conversation? So it's also like finding out how would you address this? And I always go back to, are there any opportunities where a young person or you as a mentor might be in front of other young people or mentors, and what harm may be caused if there are certain things espoused or shared in that community? When it comes to training, I want to just, ask you all, what type of training does your program currently offer to volunteers to handle critical moments with LGBTQ plus youth? And then if you have an idea, what topics should volunteers receive training on before they're even matched with a person? So you can type that into the chat. I also want to share one thing to remember is your training can be the last part of your screening process. There's some folks who actually like onboard mentors, and the training is part of them being matched. But I actually looked at the training as the final step, because when trainings come up, usually in group dynamics, people will share how they would approach topics with young people, how they respond to a young person ghosting them or not responding to their communication in a timely manner, how they would respond to a young person who had sexual health questions. So all of that stuff that plays out, and sometimes those personal values join the training. And that's an indication that either they're going to need additional training or that they may not actually be the right fit. Some people know how to interview very well, but in a training dynamic where you're interacting with a number of other personalities, some of those things can come out. So I actually, in my program, you didn't actually get approved to be a mentor until you were done with training. And then I would make the final decision. Okay, yes. Let's see. Training is our final step of the process. Sherry, you see, right? And because you do those scenarios specifically on how you would handle a mentee coming out to them. So you see exactly what I'm talking about. Kasia says, I explore intention. People that maybe use harmful language they grew up with, but are they willing to accept direction and change behavior, right? Empathy for others. Kiara, you don't have a specific mentoring training for LGBTQ plus youth, but you have done some research on with yourself, right? God, I'm getting so many responses. Okay. So it might even be, there are small things that you can do that will make some recommendations on things that can be included. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an intentional separate training. It can be part of your general training because so these are just examples, so some key information related to lived experiences of LGBTQ plus youth, some of the demographics, some of the risks. So a lot of folks don't know that up to 40%, almost half of all homeless youth in the United States are LGBTQ plus identified. And that 1 out of 3 of all individuals who are experiencing homelessness now are formerly system involved. And so putting those things together, you have an idea that these are things that you can mention during training. Intersectionality. So this idea that when we're interacting with young people, there's more than just race and ethnicity, that there's an immigration status, that there's the language, that there's the marital status of their family, that there's the geography, all of those things. Some skills. So building competence and strategies to support LGBTQ plus youth. A lot of folks don't know that the breakdowns, so after that honeymoon period that comes with, the match, sometimes there is some sort of rupture that happens in the relationship. And a young person being questioning and not feeling that they can actually talk to their mentor may be that rupture, the breakdown that happens in that relationship. Understanding how confidentiality works. So if you have a training right now where you're not explicitly talking about what your confidentiality policy is around LGBTQ youth, I would highly recommend adding that now as the landscape is going to be changing. How to respond non-judgmentally. The importance of using affirming language and personal pronouns. How to set boundaries. How to respond if they have questions about their parents and coming out to their parents or talking to their parents, and then how to make referrals to get resources and some ways to practice. So I actually had an activity I called a deer in the headlights, and I would have just one sentence that a young person might say. So everything from I tried weed this weekend and it was great. And then actually having 2 folks actually role play. How would you approach this if a young person said this to you? How do you do this in a non-judgmental way without the lecture? And so one of those things could be, as you do a role play, just a single sentence. I think I might be gay, or I think I might be, bisexual. And that one sentence can be a role play, and you can actually help those mentors to work out what they would do in those scenarios. So it's an opportunity to be more proactive rather than reactive. Okay. I'm going to just offer some justification. So this training offers resources and skills to help a mentor be prepared to meet those individual needs of the mentee. The last thing I wanted to see as a Mac support specialist is a mentor calling, like taking space from a young person and calling me and saying, this thing is happening and I don't know what to do. Not knowing how to respond in the moment. Increasing opportunities for empathy and advocacy. When a young person feels like they're not judged, you're going to keep them. But if you judge them in your body language and the way you talk to them, interact with them, you will lose them. That mantra I will take with you, I hope you take with you today is, if you judge them, you will lose them, right? And so making sure that mentors have an energy that is inviting, that is affirming, that is supportive. And then promoting self-efficacy and confidence to handle critical moments in the relationship. So it's just adding more skills to the mentor's repertoire. I'm going to pass it over to Christian to talk about matching.
Yeah, so I want to give you an example of a matching policy and have you take a look at it. And I want to say that all of the kind of examples we've been sharing are good examples, right? Like they all are meant in the spirit of keeping young people in the most general sense, adhering to some of the guidance from the elements of effective practice. What we're trying to do is show that those general examples may not always line up for LGBTQ plus young people. So the websites we showed, the job description, all of them reflect, again, some real intentional support for all young people, but may require additional levels of intention for LGBTQ plus. So I want you to look at this matching policy and tell me what you see when you look at this. And this is from a great template, actually. I mean, I think it has a lot of really great, useful ways of thinking about, sample policies and practices, but it's also 25 years old. And I know that a lot of your programs probably have policies and procedures that were written 25 years ago and may not have ever been revisited. What do you see here? What is something that kind of, Abby, absolutely, it excludes non-binary mentors and young people. If you look at that last paragraph, matches must be either male adult to male youth or female adult to female youth. In special circumstances and with board or director approval, it is acceptable for female mentors to be matched with male youth. It is never acceptable for male mentors to be matched with female youth. So I want you to look at that and think about your own matching policies and how they are inclusive of gender identity, inclusive of youth that fall all along the spectrum. I want to say that, Big Brothers Big Sisters of New York City has an all gender matching policy now, which is pretty amazing. It really ends up creating opportunities for all of the matches that could be most useful to the young person to happen. And of course, they have a series of conversations and safeguards and all of those components. And yet it's super welcoming. It's an opportunity to invite all of the kind of spectrum that we have of young people that we're serving to be able to participate and be matched with a mentor. So I wanted to highlight this as it's a great example of something that generally works, and it may require some additional levels of intention to make sure that LGBTQ young people are also able to be matched with the best mentor for them. I want to give you a few benchmarks and justifications on the next slide, and we're going to have to go through these as quickly as we can. So I may skip some of the activities so we can get to the Q&A at the end. But basically, include preferences. Make sure that there is an opportunity to learn more about strategies to match based on shared lived experiences. Make sure that whenever you are matching, we found that a lot of times creating the right match may take time, as you just heard when Nia was talking about training, that trust can be an issue, that young people may really want to make sure they have the right fit. And so you could do group matching activities that naturally allow for the mentee to choose who is the best fit. And then again, along those lines, it really is thinking more about broadening the umbrella. In a lot of ways, your current practices may speak to large groups of young people, but not all. And so taking these next steps actually expand the umbrella and help you live that mission statement that you have. So I'll pass it back to Nia to do monitoring, and then we've got a couple more after that, and we'll jump right into the Q&A.
Okay, so another scenario, type into the chat how you would respond. So you may be a match support specialist or someone who's monitoring a match. A mentee in your program has been getting bullied in school. Today, they let you know it's because they've been kicked out of their swimming club due to a recent ban on trans youth playing sports. How might you respond if you are a mentor or a match support specialist? Okay. So how might you respond if legislation is passed in your area? Okay. Savannah says, I would first thank the student for trusting me enough to share this with me. Thankfully, you're in Vermont. Thank you, Vermont. I was just in Jamaica, Vermont over the summer. You're protected. Yes. So think about, and you may not have an answer right now when it comes to a scenario like this, because the legislation is advancing, it's getting passed, and it's evolving. So you may not actually know how to respond. Some of the benchmarks that we look for would be when it comes to monitoring a match is a mentor handbook with referral and resource information. In-person or online support groups to mentors, working with LGBTQ plus youth, group activities for LGBTQ plus youth, opportunities for safe and supportive connections, and leadership opportunities. And some of the justifications behind this, providing opportunities for mentor relationships and programming to serve as a protective factor. We were talking about refuge. So how do we give a young person refuge as they are being rejected in this way? Connecting youth with resources and connections that they may not have access to in their day-to-day. One thing that I was just looking for, I actually was looking for swim classes, and I found in DC that there is an LGBTQ plus swim club. And so while it may not be, something that the young person can engage in at school, might it behoove us to search and see if there is an affirming space for a kid? Okay. And then when it comes to closure, so closure, it's a little bit it's even more difficult now when you're terminating matches, because young people are so in need of caring and supportive adults right now. And so when you are thinking about closure, just asking yourself these 3 questions, and type in the chat as well. So when you're thinking specifically about LGBTQ plus youth, knowing what the climate looks like, how can volunteers end their relationships with young people? Okay. And then also, how can your program support LGBTQ plus youth to build new networks of support and locate natural mentors? And which supports or connections might an LGBTQ plus youth need when their mentoring services end? Type into the chat, what are some of the things that you might consider when you are working with an LGBTQ plus youth and the match is closing up, it is wrapping up? And Madison, I see this excellent, excellent response to that young person. But type into the chat, what are some extra things we might consider as you have to terminate or close matches with LGBTQ plus youth? What are some things we want to have in place? Okay, I see a great example from Kasha. Connect with local agencies and networks that the youth can get involved with beyond your program. It takes a village. Use online programs as well if there are no or limited local ones. Pierce says, have a closing plan from the beginning. So be proactive, not reactive. Excellent, Pierce. Hannah says, making sure the closure process is clear so everyone at the end of the relationship feels healthy and not hurtful. Bryson says, connect the youth with similar organizations, clubs, and resources. Holly actually has a question for the young person. How did you feel or not feel? So actually collecting some qualitative data to see what changes can be made in closure or when you're terminating matches. Excellent examples. So just some benchmarks, including a discussion that encourages the reflection of identity changes and growth. I always make this recommendation as you're closing out on a relationship, you as the adult regarding the growth that you've seen in that young person. And that growth can even be in them synthesizing their identities. And then promoting opportunities for you to identify and recruit positive and natural mentors in their lives. So while I'm not going to be in your life, who is someone that can show up for you? Are there places where you can find other supportive adults or people, right? And because young people also often lack access to in-person role models and supports. Christian does a great job of actually calling folks possibility models. So especially with the LGBTQ youth, we need to see, young people need to see what the possibilities can look like as adults. And that means finding, role models, possibility models. Okay. All right. I'm going to hand it off to Christian to close us off with evaluation, and then we'll get into Q&A.
Yeah, so I really want to thank you all for the conversations happening in the chat box right now. It's really heartening to see all of the suggestions, the questions, and the opportunities for folks to learn from each other. And as I leave the space and our time together, that is one of the most inspirational parts for me, is just seeing this commitment that each of you are holding to share insights and some strategies as we move forward. I want to talk about evaluation really quickly. And a lot of what I wanted to say is really, again, looking at some of the language we use and the way that it may exclude a lot of young people and our volunteers from the LGBTQ plus community. So this is a great example. When we're looking at intake forms, always useful to have strategies to learn more about the folks that are coming into the program. But what do you see about this? What is something that you end up having just kind of first responses about what is included or excluded from this mentor application? Yeah, male and female boxes only, binaryism. Um, there's very few questions about, again, lived experience. And I will say one of the worst things, and I hope all of you, this is one of my pet peeves, is please don't use male, female, other as your 3 checkboxes. I think in a lot of ways that may even be worse than not including the ways that folks enter into your program. I want to look on the next slide because it gives you some examples of what is possible whenever you are collecting data. And it really is kind of looking at different strategies. I think a lot of times actually leaving open-ended opportunities, because so many people have different ways of describing who they are in this world and giving them the chance to do that. I've also seen a lot of folks have kind of a spectrum of options, like especially for young people. You could say on a scale of 1 to 10, some people feel more like a boy, some people feel more like a girl, some people don't feel like they connect with either. Where do you fall in the spectrum? And it can help you have a better sense of the young people and what their entry point is as far as what they're sharing about their identity with you. And so this is just another example. I also want to say that on mentorist.org, there is a PowerPoint deck I can send to you, which also gives a lot of different ways of thinking about evaluation and language that could be useful as far as both intake and tracking and monitoring, as well as looking at outcomes for this population. So a couple things about evaluation. Again, I'll be very quick. We know there are a lot of outcome areas that are of importance. So connectedness, resilience, having a more hopeful future, being able to look at closeness and mentoring relationships. All of these are really mission critical for LGBTQ plus young people. So being able to evaluate that in some of your questions and how you're asking them. Also, again, if we look at some of the issues around confidentiality that are going to be more present here in the US, it's going to take a lot more care in protecting some of this data to understand the kids that you're serving. So I just want to leave it very high level with both these benchmarks, recognize that all of these things are important to do. And that if you aren't tracking, you aren't serving. And I really have to say that too, because a lot of times programs may not realize that they do have LGBTQ plus young people in their care. They're not asking questions, so it makes them justify not serving LGBTQ plus young people. And that fulfills itself. And so this is an opportunity, again, to make more visible and to offer more space to make sure we live our mission statements. So let's look at our last couple slides. And I want to talk very briefly about our action plan for change. And this is what we used with Big Brothers Big Sisters. Mentorist, I'm doing cohorts now that you can apply to be part of a cohort that's happening in the spring that will walk you through each and every one of these steps. Basically, the starting point is training. All of what we've done this year, this entire series has been about building awareness, creating empathy, providing language so that you can actually engage with each other to make this world a better place for LGBTQ plus people. The next step is assembling allies, having conversations about what you have in your services, your policies, your practices, including representation of all of the voices of folks that can be involved in approving change. Taking time to approve those processes. In the cohort that I lead, we provide coaching to help you with some of the challenges you're facing as you're going through and updating and having all of these values-based challenges that may end up happening whenever you are creating change. Finding partners and then continuing your learning. So recognizing, as we always say, that ally is a verb. It's not something that you earn once and you're done. It's something that has to continue day in and day out. So with that said, a couple resources we just wanted to share before we get into Q&A and we close out, which is on the next slides. Mentorist also provides free technical assistance, so you can go to my website to learn more about the support we offer, the cohorts. There's a free ally verb training, so for some of your mentors that are looking for strengths-based approaches, you can actually take the courses right there. And then the LGBTQ plus supplement is something I really do recommend as kind of the North Star for this work. I want to end with a quote. And so if I could have the Margaret Mead quote, just to thank all of you for being here. And this kind of brings us full circle, which is the idea that all of us are that ripple effect. And that if you pull from what Margaret Mead said, which is never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. This group of us throughout this course of this year are the ones that are able to plant new seeds, to ripple that change out into our programs, our communities, and our lives. We're going to be even more needed as we move forward. So I want to thank you for being part of this community and for part of these conversations and all of the sharing that you've done with us. We look forward to continuing to make that change in the world. So with that said, Jake, if there are a couple questions, and also if you want to close us out, happy to transition.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you both so much. I think we'll just stick with resources for now. I put my email in the chat. So if you did have a question and we didn't get a chance to answer it today, please email me your question. I'll make sure that a combination of Nia, Christian, and I will get you answers to your questions. But just to make sure that we're ending on time, I want to share these additional resources with everybody. So as always, you can contact us regarding webinars, any ideas you have, things you want to see at that URL, or excuse me, at that email address. We also have an extensive and really amazing affiliate network across the country. So by clicking that link or going to our website again, mentoring.org, you can find your local affiliate that can assist you with everything from public awareness to advocacy, training and resources, etc. Mentoring Connector is a really great resource if you're looking for mentors and you want to put your program on there. That's where mentors can go to find mentoring opportunities. And then, as Christian was just saying, we have the National Mentoring Resource Center where you can apply for training and or no cost training and technical assistance, again, for a variety of different things. We can go on to the next slide. Remember, there will be an anonymous survey after this, about 3 to 4 minutes, to let us know how we did. And then again, all of these resources, contact information, recording slides will be on our website as well in about a week, and you'll also receive an email for that. But again, I want to thank particularly Christian and Nia so much for this entire series. This has been absolutely amazing. Just seeing the chat and seeing everybody's reactions, you've made such a huge impact through this. And so thank you for sharing your expertise. Thank you for your vulnerability. your humor and your joy, your care for the field. And again, thank you to everybody here and who has attended either one webinar, all of them, a couple of them, for your engagement and questions. This has obviously been a really amazing learning community. Sending you all warmth. I think we have one more slide to share about next month's webinar, which is Conversations with Youth. That'll be the last one for this year as well. We're planning on partnering with Silver Lining Mentoring for that as well. So join us then. But again, thank you all so much for being here, but especially to my fellow queer and trans people in the audience. We see you, we appreciate you. Hope everybody takes care, sending you all warmth. And again, thanks so much for joining us. Take care, everybody. See you on the next one.